There's a moment in every relationship when silence says more than words ever could. When someone pulls away, not because they don't care, but because caring scares them. That's the avoidant. They crave love, yet run from it. They want connection, yet fear losing control. But here's the truth. When an avoidant truly wants you forever, their actions speak in quiet, powerful ways. They won't chase you like a romantic movie scene. They'll circle back when the world feels safe again. They won't flood you with words. They'll show up in small, steady gestures that mean everything. Understanding them is not about chasing. It's about recognizing the signs of deep commitment hidden behind emotional walls. Let's explore the 6 powerful signs that mean an avoidant wants you forever. When someone who has spent their life avoiding emotional closeness begins to let you in, it doesn't happen in one grand moment of revelation. It happens quietly in moments so subtle you might miss them if you're not paying attention. It begins when they share a memory they've never told anyone before, or when they allow you to see them not at their best, but in their uncertainty. That's the heartbeat of transformation. The avoidant is someone who's learned to equate intimacy with danger. Somewhere along their journey, they decided that vulnerability leads to pain, that getting too close means losing control, that attachment is a risk they can't afford. So they built walls, tall, protective, and seemingly unbreakable. But what those walls really protect is fear. Fear of rejection, fear of judgment, fear of not being enough. When an avoidant starts to let you in, it's not just a change in behavior, it's a revolution in their internal world. At first, it may look like hesitation. They'll open the door just a crack, then close it again. They'll share something deep one day, then pull away the next. It's easy to misread that as confusion or disinterest, but it's not. It's emotional calibration. They're testing the waters to see if they can finally be safe in a space where they've never felt safe before. Every small confession, every moment of eye contact held a little longer, every time they don't retreat after showing emotion, that's progress. To someone who's used to hiding, being seen is terrifying. And yet, the fact that they choose to try means something inside them has shifted. They're tired of living behind armor. They want connection, even if they don't yet know how to navigate it. When they begin to let you in, you'll notice their words changing. They may stop talking in facts and start speaking in feelings, even if awkwardly. Instead of saying, "It's fine," they might say, "I felt overwhelmed." Instead of shutting down a conversation, they might admit, "This is hard for me to talk about." Those small moments are monumental. For them, expressing emotion is not natural. It's learned behavior built through trust. They're not looking for someone to fix them. They're looking for someone to see them and not run away. To them, every moment they open up is a risk because history has taught them that people leave when they're truly known. If you respond with patience and calm, they begin to rewire that belief. You become the proof that intimacy doesn't always end in loss. It's important to understand that for the avoidant, letting you in doesn't mean instant transparency. It's a gradual, layered process. They might share a story about their past, but leave out the emotion behind it. Then later, they'll revisit it, this time adding how they felt. It's not manipulation or withholding. It's self-protection loosening its grip. Their heart is testing your consistency. They're asking in their own way, can I show you more of who I am and still be safe? Every time your presence answers that question with a yes, without pressure, without judgment, their walls then a little more. There's a beautiful paradox here. The avoidant wants closeness just as much as anyone else. They just fear it more deeply. They crave connection but associate it with loss of identity. So when they start to let you in, they're not just allowing love, they're reclaiming their sense of safety in love. They're rewriting their internal script from love suffocates to love supports. You may notice them start to ask about your emotions more often or want to understand your experiences. That's them shifting from self-protection to connection. It might be clumsy at first. They might still retreat after opening up, but the retreat will be shorter, the silence softer, and the return more intentional. That's what healing looks like in real time, not perfection, but progress. This process is sacred because it's not about control, it's about trust. You cannot force an avoidant to open up, you can only earn it. Every time you show up with consistency, they learn that safety isn't a fantasy. Every time you listen instead of reacting, they learn that being understood isn't dangerous. Every time you don't abandon them when they're distant, they learn that love doesn't vanish when things get uncomfortable. It's in those moments, the quiet, often overlooked ones, that the avoidant starts lowering their guard. They begin to feel something unfamiliar yet freeing the peace of being emotionally seen and still accepted. What most people misunderstand is that emotional intimacy for an avoidant isn't about grand declarations or dramatic confessions. It's about quiet presence when they let you see them tired, frustrated, or uncertain, and they don't mask it. That's them letting you in. When they ask for space but still check in, that's them saying, I still want connection, I just need to feel safe. When they reach out first after a conflict, that's courage, because to them, reaching out means risking rejection. So if they do, it means you've become more important than their fear. At some point, you'll notice that their walls don't come up as often. They'll start to initiate deeper conversations. They might admit when they miss you. They might share dreams, regrets, or hopes they've never voiced before. That's when you'll realize that what once took effort now feels natural. Their walls didn't fall overnight. They dissolved slowly through trust, patience, and emotional truth. And the greatest gift you can give in return is to meet their vulnerability with your own. Because once they start to let you in, they're not just trusting you with their heart, they're trusting you with their healing. Consistency is the love language of someone who has spent most of their life avoiding attachment. For an avoidant, comfort is found in distance. Solitude is their safety zone, the place where they don't have to explain, justify, or risk being misunderstood. It's not that they don't crave closeness, it's that closeness feels unpredictable. People in their experience can change without warning, and promises can turn into pressure. That's why when an avoidant starts choosing consistency over their own comfort, it's not a small shift, it's a sign of deep emotional transformation. They are stepping out of their safe space to stay connected, even when it challenges their natural instincts. You'll notice this shift in subtle ways at first. They'll begin showing up more regularly, not because they suddenly became dependent, but because they're learning the value of emotional stability. They start replying faster, keeping their word, making plans, and following through. They begin doing the small things that seem ordinary to most people, but are extraordinary for them. To someone who has spent years equating closeness with danger, consistency is not habit, it's bravery. It means they've reached a point where the risk of losing you feels heavier than the comfort of isolation. That choice is monumental. They're no longer running from love. They're walking toward it carefully, but intentionally. When an avoidant starts showing up consistently, you may also notice that their disappearances become shorter and less frequent. In the past, when emotions ran high or conflict arose, their instinct was to retreat completely, to vanish until the storm passed. That withdrawal was never about punishing you. It was their way of protecting themselves from emotional overwhelm. But now they might still step back, just not as far. They might need a day, not a week. They might send a brief message instead of going completely silent. That's their way of saying, I still need space, but I don't want to lose this connection. It's subtle, but it's growth. It's them learning that they can have space and love at the same time. Consistency for an avoidant is not about routine, it's about emotional courage. They've spent years controlling the rhythm of their relationships, when to get close, when to pull back, because control felt like safety. But when they start choosing to stay, even when things feel intense or uncertain, it's a sign they're developing emotional endurance. They're beginning to tolerate the discomfort that comes with real intimacy. This doesn't mean they'll suddenly become expressive or needy. It means they're quietly learning that love can coexist with independence. They start to realize that showing up doesn't mean losing themselves. It means expanding themselves. What's remarkable about this phase is how they begin to balance their need for space with their desire for connection. You'll see them trying to create stability where there once was unpredictability. They'll check in not out of obligation, but out of genuine care. They'll remember small details about your day. They'll make small gestures, like sending a message to say they're thinking of you or showing up when you didn't expect them to. For them, these actions are significant. They represent a new internal dialogue, one that says, I can be close and still be safe. That's the voice of a healed avoidant, or at least one who is healing. You'll also start to see them face moments that would have previously made them run. When things get emotional or uncomfortable, instead of escaping, they might stay in the conversation longer. They might not say much, but their presence speaks volumes. It's them learning that connection doesn't have to mean confrontation. They're starting to replace avoidance with resilience. This doesn't happen overnight. It's a slow and sometimes uneven process. But every time they choose to stay instead of withdraw, they're building a new emotional muscle. Each repetition strengthens their ability to remain connected even when it's hard. Their consistency may not look like traditional romance. It's not always flowers or declarations of love. It's showing up when they said they would. It's remembering your boundaries and respecting them. It's learning how to navigate emotions without shutting down. It's small, grounded acts that whisper, you matter to me? And though they may not verbalize it, every consistent action is their way of saying, I'm here, I'm trying, I'm choosing you. That's love, spoken in the only language they truly trust, behavior over words. At times, you may feel the old pattern resurfacing. They might still withdraw when overwhelmed or go quiet during conflict. But even then, the difference will be that they return sooner, calmer, more willing to repair. They're learning that leaving doesn't protect them from pain, it prolongs it. So they start to practice staying, and that practice turns into consistency. That consistency turns into reliability, and reliability is the foundation of lasting connection. You'll feel it, not in what they say, but in what they continue to do. Consistency is also how they begin to rebuild trust, not just with you, but with themselves. Avoidants often carry deep self-doubt, the belief that they can't maintain relationships without losing control or hurting someone. When they show up again and again, they start proving to themselves that they're capable of love that doesn't destroy them. Each consistent moment becomes evidence that they can handle connection. That's when the fear begins to dissolve, replaced by a sense of grounded confidence. They realize they don't have to be perfect, they just have to be present. Over time, you'll start to see a new kind of rhythm between you, one that's stable but not restrictive, connected but not suffocating. That's the balance an avoidant seeks their entire life. When they choose consistency over comfort, they're saying something powerful without words. You're worth the effort. You're worth stepping out of my old patterns. You're worth facing my fears for. That quiet transformation is the truest indicator that an avoidant doesn't just care, they're committed. When someone who has always built emotional walls begins to focus on understanding you rather than fixing you, it's a sign of profound internal change. Avoidants have a natural tendency to distance themselves from emotional complexity. When something feels uncomfortable or unpredictable, their instinct is to either retreat or try to control the situation so they don't feel vulnerable. They see emotions, both theirs and others, as things that need to be managed, not explored. So when they stop trying to control the narrative and start leaning into curiosity, it means they're learning the language of emotional connection. They're beginning to see that understanding is safer than fixing, and empathy is stronger than control. In the beginning, an avoidant often approaches relationships like puzzles that need solutions. They want to solve what feels uncertain. If you're upset, they may tell you to calm down, not because they don't care, but because your emotion activates their fear of being engulfed or blamed. If you share something painful, they might respond logically, offering solutions instead of comfort. It's not that they lack empathy, it's that empathy requires emotional closeness, and closeness to them feels like exposure. Fixing things gives them a sense of control, and control feels like safety. But the moment they stop rushing to fix and start sitting with your feelings, they're stepping out of control and into connection. You'll notice this shift when they begin to listen differently. They stop waiting for their turn to speak. They don't interrupt with advice or analysis. Instead, they ask questions that invite you to open up more. How did that make you feel? What do you need right now? These may seem like simple words, but for an avoidant, they're a breakthrough. It means they're comfortable enough to let your emotions exist without feeling threatened by them. They're learning that understanding you doesn't mean losing themselves. It means expanding their capacity for empathy. They start to realize that love isn't about control, it's about presence. This shift doesn't happen overnight. At first, they might still default to old patterns, trying to rationalize your feelings or minimize conflict. But over time, they'll begin to notice that when they truly listen, the relationship feels more peaceful. You're calmer, they're calmer, there's less distance, less miscommunication. That feedback loop teaches them something powerful. Emotional understanding creates safety, not chaos. And for an avoidant, safety is everything. Once they realize that understanding you doesn't lead to rejection, but to closeness, they start to crave that deeper connection more than their solitude. One of the clearest signs that an avoidant is choosing understanding over fixing is their patience. In the past, when things felt emotional or overwhelming, they'd shut down. Now, they start staying longer in conversations they would have previously escaped. They don't try to rush to the end. They don't need resolution in 5 minutes. They let silence breathe between words. That stillness, that willingness to stay is growth. It's their way of saying, I may not have the answers, but I want to understand you. And in those moments, you can feel their heart slowly unlearning the old lesson that vulnerability equals danger. When an avoidant begins to understand rather than fix, they also begin to see you as an equal partner, not a problem to be managed. They start to respect your individuality. They become more curious about your emotions, your triggers, your dreams. They want to know what brings you peace and what causes you pain, not so they can control it, but so they can honor it. That curiosity is love taking root in a new form. It's no longer about keeping distance, it's about building empathy. They realize that true intimacy isn't found in perfection or control, but in the messy, real, human process of seeing and being seen. There's also a humility that appears in this phase. Avoidants often use logic as armor. It protects them from the discomfort of not knowing. But when they start listening to understand, they're accepting that love isn't a formula they can solve. They're surrendering to the fact that emotions don't follow predictable patterns. They're learning that sometimes the most powerful thing they can do is just be there, to hold space without trying to fix what can't be fixed. That shift from logic to presence marks the beginning of emotional maturity. They start to discover that connection doesn't require control, it requires trust. You'll also begin to feel a deeper emotional reciprocity. As they learn to understand you, they become more open to being understood. That's the hidden beauty of this transformation. When they stop trying to fix your feelings, they start to feel safer expressing their own. They might begin to tell you when something hurts them or when they feel anxious. They'll reveal parts of themselves they've long kept hidden. The more they understand you, the more they trust that you can understand them too. And that exchange creates the kind of emotional balance they've secretly always wanted but never knew how to build. This change also softens the energy between you. In the past, conversations might have felt like battles. One trying to be heard, the other trying to maintain control. But now there's cooperation. They start to ask, what can I do to support you? Instead of, how do we fix this? That's a major emotional milestone. They're not trying to win or solve, they're trying to connect. The need to control fades, replaced by a genuine desire to understand your experience. And when that happens, love begins to feel safe, not just for you, but for them too. Over time, this newfound empathy becomes second nature. They stop fearing emotional expression and start valuing it. They begin to realize that understanding someone deeply doesn't weaken them, it strengthens the bond. It gives them a sense of peace they never knew existed. The peace that comes from being emotionally present without needing to control the outcome. They may not use flowery words or overt displays of affection, but their quiet efforts to truly see you speak louder than anything else. And when an avoidant reaches this point, when they've learned to replace judgment with empathy and control with understanding, it's one of the clearest signs that they're not just loving you, they're evolving for you. For someone who has spent most of their life protecting their emotions, revealing their fears is one of the most vulnerable things they can ever do. Avoidants are masters at hiding behind composure. They appear calm, self-sufficient, and unaffected because that mask keeps them safe. They learned early that showing fear or insecurity invited pain, judgment, or disappointment. So they built an identity around being in control, the person who doesn't need anyone, who never shows weakness, who walks away before being left. But when an avoidant begins to open up about what scares them and still chooses to stay, something extraordinary is happening. They're no longer living through fear, they're learning to love through it. At first, this kind of openness might look small. Maybe they casually mention that they find commitment hard. Maybe they admit that they sometimes pull away because they feel unworthy of love. Or maybe for the first time, they confess how hard it is for them to trust people. These moments may not sound like much, but for an avoidant, they are monumental. Every word that reveals fear is an act of courage. It's a sign that they're beginning to trust not just you, but the connection itself. Because to reveal fear is to risk rejection, and for someone whose entire life has been structured to avoid that risk, it's nothing short of transformation. When an avoidant shares their fears, it's not a cry for help, it's an invitation. It's their way of saying, I'm trying to let you see me, even though it terrifies me. They're not seeking sympathy, they're testing emotional safety. They want to know, if I show you the parts of me I've always hidden, will you still stay? They might not phrase it that way, but every moment of honesty carries that unspoken question. And when you meet that vulnerability with acceptance instead of judgment, it changes something deep within them. It starts to rewrite their emotional script. Where they once believed that opening up led to loss, they begin to associate openness with connection. That shift can change their entire view of love. You'll notice their openness comes in layers. They don't suddenly unload every fear they have. They'll test the waters with smaller truths first. Maybe they tell you about a failed relationship that made them doubt themselves. Maybe they admit they're scared of being too much or not enough. These confessions are not random. They are emotional checkpoints. Each one is a test of safety. And when you respond gently, they move one step closer to full transparency. Slowly, the armor that once protected them begins to soften, and what emerges underneath is a real, imperfect human heart. The most powerful part, though, is not just that they reveal their fears. It's that they stay despite them. Avoidants are wired to run when things feel emotionally heavy. It's a reflex. When love feels too real, they often create distance to regain control. But when they begin to stay, even when they're uncomfortable or afraid, that's the clearest sign they want something lasting. They've reached a point where the thought of losing you feels more painful than facing their fears. So instead of fleeing, they choose to confront the discomfort. They stay through the anxiety, the uncertainty, the old fears that whisper they're not enough. Staying becomes their act of love. This is where you begin to see their emotional growth in real time. In the past, their pattern was predictable connection, fear, withdrawal. But now the cycle changes, they open up, they feel fear rising, and instead of retreating, they breathe through it. They might still become quiet or distant for a while, but they don't vanish. They circle back, they keep engaging. They start talking about what scares them instead of running from it. That's emotional courage, the ability to face the very thing that once made them hide. And for an avoidant, that's as intimate as saying, I love you. When they start expressing fears, you'll also notice something else. They begin to look for reassurance differently. Instead of testing you through distance or silence, They might ask questions that reveal their vulnerability. Do you really mean that? Are you sure you're okay with me? What if I can't be what you need? These questions aren't insecurity in the usual sense. They're expressions of emerging trust. They're learning to seek connection directly, not defensively. They're learning that reassurance can come from openness, not avoidance. Each time you answer with patience and honesty, you reinforce that it's safe for them to stay. It's also important to understand that for an avoidant, fear doesn't disappear, it transforms. They may never become completely fearless in love. But what changes is how they handle that fear. Instead of letting it control their behavior, they start acknowledging it and moving through it with you. That's the difference between running away and growing together. Their fear of intimacy doesn't vanish, but their faith in the connection becomes stronger than the fear itself. That's what it means when they stay after revealing their fears. It's not that they've conquered their anxiety, it's that they've chosen love over it. The beauty of this phase is in its quiet power. It's not loud or dramatic. It's not a grand confession followed by sweeping romance. It's found in small, deeply human moments. The hesitation before they speak, the trembling honesty in their words, the courage in their decision to stay. Those moments are sacred because they represent years of emotional conditioning being undone. Each time they face their fears with you, they're building new emotional wiring that connects love with safety, not pain. Over time, you'll see that their openness deepens your bond. You start having conversations you never thought possible. The connection becomes more authentic, more grounded. They start to realize that love doesn't have to mean losing control. It can mean being seen and accepted exactly as they are. And once an avoidant reaches that realization, everything changes. They stop running from love. They stop fighting vulnerability. They begin to trust that being scared doesn't mean they're weak. It means they're alive, evolving, and capable of something real. Revealing their fears and staying anyway becomes their ultimate expression of commitment, the quiet proof that they want you, not just for now, but for good, for someone who has spent most of their life keeping love at arm's length. The idea of a future with someone can feel terrifying. Avoidants live in the present because the future feels like a commitment they can't control. They prefer short-term safety over long-term vulnerability. Planning ahead with another person means imagining a life where they can't easily withdraw, where they're emotionally invested, accountable, and seen. But when they start including you in their future, even in small, passing ways, it's one of the clearest signs that something inside them has shifted. It means they've begun to picture a life where connection doesn't feel like a trap, but like home. You might not hear them say, "I want to spend my life with you." Avoidants rarely use grand romantic language because such words feel heavy, almost suffocating. Instead, you'll hear hints of permanence woven into casual conversation. They'll mention places they want to visit, and suddenly it's "weh" instead of "I." They'll talk about plans months ahead and naturally include you in them. They'll imagine simple shared experiences like cooking together, moving to a new city, or celebrating future milestones. These might sound like harmless remarks, but for them, they're profound. Every time they use "weh" instead of "I," they're practicing emotional permanence. They're saying, without directly saying it, that you're part of their long-term picture. Avoidants often struggle with the concept of forever because it represents loss of control. In their minds, long-term commitment can mean dependence, pressure, or potential heartbreak. So when they start to plan a future, even subtly, it's a quiet declaration that they no longer see love as confinement. They've started to believe that commitment doesn't have to mean losing their independence. It can mean building something solid with someone who accepts their need for space and understands their rhythm. That realization is huge. It means the emotional walls that once separated them from true intimacy are finally beginning to crumble. You might notice they begin making decisions with you in mind. They'll start asking for your opinion on their goals, their career choices, or where they want to live. They'll start considering your feelings before making plans that affect both of you. This shift might not be dramatic, but it's meaningful. It shows they're moving from self-preservation to partnership. They're starting to see the relationship not as something temporary or conditional, but as part of their identity. They're no longer protecting themselves from the idea of a shared future. They're building one brick by brick in their own quiet way. What's interesting about this stage is that the avoidance version of planning the future doesn't look like typical romance. They might not talk about marriage, rings, or big commitments right away. Instead, they'll focus on the everyday shared experiences, routines, and goals. They'll make you a part of their normal life, which for them is far more intimate than making big promises. The reason is simple. Avoidants value realism over fantasy. Grand gestures make them feel pressured, but steady integration makes them feel safe. So when they include you in their daily visions of the future, whether it's talking about getting a dog, redecorating a space together, or taking a trip, they're expressing love in the most grounded and authentic way they know. Sometimes their future talk will come through actions more than words. They'll start to leave their things at your place or make room for yours at theirs. They'll remember dates, anniversaries, or plans and take initiative to make them happen. They'll begin to show reliability, a consistency that used to be foreign to them. You might notice them thinking long term about emotional security too, not just practical matters. They'll ask questions like, what do you want your life to look like next year? Or where do you see yourself in a few years? Those questions aren't small talk, they're emotional tests. They're seeing if your vision of the future aligns with theirs. They're gauging whether it's safe to plant roots with you. For an avoidant, emotional safety comes from predictability. So when they begin to create a vision of the future with you, it's because you've become a source of emotional predictability. They know what to expect from you: honesty, calmness, understanding, and that consistency gives them permission to open their imagination, where once they feared commitment, now they find comfort in the idea of stability. It's not that they've suddenly lost their independence. It's that they've realized independence isn't threatened by love. It's strengthened by it when shared with the right person. The moment they start to talk about someday with you, you're witnessing emotional progress that took years to build. Those words don't come lightly. To them, the future is sacred territory, the place where promises live. So when they let you into that space, it means they've allowed you into the part of their mind that once was completely off limits. They're showing trust not just in you, but in the idea of togetherness itself. And that's something they may never have believed in before. You'll see this trust reflected in how they behave. They'll become more emotionally available, more grounded, and more open to compromise. They'll start making choices that protect the relationship, not just their independence. It's also worth noting that this phase brings a new kind of vulnerability for them. Imagining a shared future is hopeful, but it's also risky. It means they're emotionally invested in something they can't fully control. That thought alone used to terrify them, but now it excites them in a new way. They've begun to associate love with growth instead of loss. The fear of what if this ends starts to fade, replaced by a deeper question, what if this lasts? That question fuels their willingness to stay, to plan, and to commit, even if they never use those exact words. The more they lean into that vision, the more they build confidence in love as something enduring, not fleeting. In time, their vision of the future with you becomes a quiet but powerful promise. It's not made of grand declarations, but of consistent, thoughtful inclusion. It's the way they keep showing up, the way they think ahead with you in mind, the way they begin to speak in terms of we. Each of these moments is a window into their heart, a heart that once feared closeness but now finds peace in imagining a shared path forward. When an avoidant begins to plan a future with you, it's not just a sign that they want you. It's proof that they finally believe in the kind of love that lasts. When an avoidant finally lets their guard down and shows you their true vulnerability, it's one of the most powerful and revealing moments you can witness. These are people who have spent years mastering emotional control. They know how to appear composed, detach, and in charge of their feelings. Vulnerability to them feels like surrender. It's dangerous because it means exposure, and exposure means the possibility of being hurt. But when they begin to open up, when they allow you to see the cracks beneath their armor, that's when you know you've touched something deep inside them. It's not just affection at that point, it's trust at its highest level. For someone who's spent their life guarding their emotions, choosing to be vulnerable with you means they've decided that the risk of losing you is greater than the fear of being hurt. This vulnerability doesn't always come in the form of tears or emotional breakdowns. More often, it's subtle, a quiet confession, a small act of honesty, or a rare moment of openness about their fears. They might start sharing stories about their past that they've never told anyone before. They may talk about their childhood, the people who let them down, or the moments that shaped their fear of closeness. They might reveal insecurities they've kept hidden for years, not because they want sympathy, but because they finally feel safe enough to show you the parts of themselves they usually keep locked away. When an avoidant does this, it's a sign they no longer see vulnerability as weakness. They see it as connection, a bridge between you and them that can only exist when there's mutual trust. Sometimes vulnerability shows up in silence too. Avoidants aren't always great with words, but you'll notice it in their actions. The way they lean into you when they're stressed, the way they allow you to see them in moments of uncertainty, or how they stop pretending to be fine when they're not. They might start to admit when they're overwhelmed or when they've made a mistake, something they never used to do. They might stop withdrawing during conflict and instead try to work through it, even if it's uncomfortable. These small gestures might seem ordinary, but for an avoidant, they represent enormous courage. It means they're learning that love doesn't require perfection, it just requires honesty. Another form of vulnerability for an avoidant is emotional reciprocity, letting you care for them. For years, they've probably been the ones to control how close someone can get. They're used to being self-sufficient, managing everything on their own, and shutting down when someone tries to help. But when they start to let you take care of them, when they allow you to comfort them, support them, or simply be there when they're struggling, it means they're breaking old patterns. They're allowing themselves to be seen as human, not invincible. They're learning that love can be a two-way exchange, not just something they have to guard themselves against. And that's a monumental step forward in their emotional growth. You'll also notice vulnerability in their language. They might start saying things that reveal emotional depth they once denied. Instead of hiding behind sarcasm, distraction, or deflection, they begin expressing what they actually feel. They'll start saying, I missed you, I was scared, I didn't want to lose you. Those words might come out softly, even awkwardly, but they carry the weight of their transformation. They're no longer just managing emotions, they're sharing them. For avoidants, that's a sign that love has become a safe place, not a battlefield. They no longer feel like they have to protect themselves from you. Instead, they trust you to handle their truth gently. In relationships, vulnerability also looks like compromise. For someone who used to run from emotional intensity, staying and working through discomfort is an act of bravery. They'll start choosing communication over silence, connection over avoidance. When conflicts arise, instead of disappearing or shutting down, they'll try to resolve things, not because they suddenly enjoy confrontation, but because they value the relationship enough to face the discomfort. That's how love changes an avoidant. It teaches them that being open doesn't lead to destruction, it leads to healing. They begin to realize that intimacy isn't something to escape from, it's something that strengthens them. The deeper their feelings grow, the more they start to redefine strength. Before, strength meant being distant, unaffected, and emotionally self-reliant. Now, it means being honest, vulnerable, and connected. They begin to understand that love isn't about control, it's about surrendering to something bigger than fear. You'll see it in how they respond to you emotionally. They'll stop trying to win arguments and start trying to understand. They'll admit when they're wrong. They'll start apologizing, not out of guilt, but out of genuine care for your feelings. They'll let you see the side of them that's afraid, insecure, and uncertain, because they finally trust that you won't use those weaknesses against them. For an avoidant, the ability to show vulnerability is one of the last stages of emotional commitment. It means they're not just comfortable with you, they're emotionally invested in a way that feels irreversible. They've accepted that love comes with risk, but they've decided the connection is worth it. They've stopped running, stopped guarding, and started showing up fully, even when it scares them. And the more they practice vulnerability, the more they discover that being open doesn't diminish their power, it deepens it. It allows them to experience love in a way they never thought possible, real, raw, and liberating. When they begin to open their heart, they'll start wanting deeper conversations. They'll crave emotional honesty and seek reassurance, not because they're needy, but because they're learning how to trust intimacy. You'll notice them expressing gratitude more often, complimenting you not just for what you do, but for who you are. They want to know your fears too, because vulnerability isn't just about them revealing themselves. It's about creating emotional reciprocity where both of you can be authentic without fear of judgment. This shared vulnerability becomes the foundation of something that can last. It's no longer a relationship built on chasing or retreating. It's built on mutual trust where both hearts can breathe freely. In the end, when an avoidant shows vulnerability, it's not just love, it's transformation. It's the moment they stop being ruled by fear and start living through courage. Vulnerability becomes their bridge to connection, the proof that they've learned to trust not only you, but love itself. It means they want you in their life, not just as a companion, but as someone who sees them, truly sees them, beyond the walls they once built for protection. It's the most intimate and permanent sign that they want you, not for a moment, but for forever. And so, my friend, as we come to the end of this message, remember this: when an avoidant truly begins to open their heart, when they plan a future with you, when they allow vulnerability to replace fear, it's not a small thing. It's monumental. It's the victory of love over self-protection, of trust over doubt. They may not express it in the loud, passionate ways the world expects, but their quiet consistency, their effort to stay, and their willingness to grow with you are their greatest declarations of love. You see, real connection isn't about chasing or convincing someone to love you. It's about creating a space safe enough for love to exist naturally, a space where walls crumble, fear fades, and two people meet in truth. If you're with someone who's avoidant and you've seen these signs, understand this: you've touched their soul in a way few ever do. You've helped them believe again, not just in love, but in the idea that love can last. So take a moment to reflect on this, because the greatest love stories aren't built on perfection, they're built on patience, growth, and emotional courage. If someone has ever chosen to stay when their instinct was to run, that's love at its most honest form. If this message spoke to your heart, if it helped you understand love a little deeper, then don't forget to subscribe to the channel. Your support helps us reach more people who need this reminder that love, healing, and emotional transformation are possible for everyone. Hit that likey button, share this video with someone who needs to hear it today, and make sure to turn on the notification bell so you never miss another message that could change the way you see relationships, life, and yourself. Thank you for watching, thank you for your time, and thank you for being a part of this growing community of awareness and healing. Until next time, take care of your heart, believe in your worth, and never forget the right connection doesn't need to be chased, it just needs to be understood. This is your reminder to stay strong, stay kind, and keep growing. I'll see you in the next video. Much love, and thank you for being here.